Hi, this is Joe,
And Ned.
and we're on another episode of the MTG Dudes, and we are going to be talking about the weaknesses of the color pie. Kind of going a little different, taking a break from our favorite stuff, and just in a different direction. We're going to go through the five colors, obviously. Multiple colors is not included in this list, and artifacts are not included in this list, and colorless, since not all colorless are artifacts. And so that's our disclaimer. We're just hitting on the main colors themselves. This is strictly our opinion, and yeah,
These are shortcomings within each color, and you should take them into consideration before you build a monocolor deck. We don't want to steer you away from that by any means. Just be aware there will be weaknesses if you try to do a solo color.
and just so you know, our last video we did was on the strengths of each color. Again, according to our opinion, and I think it's pretty accurate. But again, it is our opinion, so disclaimer. If you have a disagreement, please let us know. If you agree, let us know. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up. Please like, share, and subscribe. And now we're just going to get into it. Why don't we go backwards and start from here there?
All right. So we're going to start by talking about black. Probably the biggest obstacle to black, or no, that's blue. My apologies. Probably the biggest obstacle to blue is the size of the creatures. Generally speaking, they're not very large. I think the highest toughness on average is a 4. There are some that are bigger than that, but that's a reason why I think they put so many unblockables in the blue color, was because they're not all that strong to start with.
If you look at the blue, there's a lot of creatures. I'm not gonna lie. I'm organizing my cards. I'm realizing just how many creatures they put on blue. But I'm also realizing just how many creatures are very, like you said, the creatures are just not very worth it. I mean, there's some sphinxes. A couple of those have effects, but again, you want the creatures in blue because of what they do, not because of their size. They have, you have a murmuring mystic and a Talron Sky Summoner. Every time you throw a spell, an instant sorcery, you get creatures. Real small ones, but they're flying, so that does give them evasion. That's the other thing blue does that's good is evasion, but again, they're small.
Yep. And the big creatures that are in blue have almost an insufferable mana cost. They're 7, 8, 10 CMC, so they're not going to hit the board early, and when they do finally come on board, it's usually too late.
Blue is mainly relies on spells to counter spells, to return stuff to hand, to basically make it so you have to play later in the game. That's another weakness I find with blue is the fact that when you're going against somebody who has an aggro deck, you're not going to be able to keep up. Whether you counter spells or return stuff to the hand, you're just not going to be able to keep up.
Are we ready to move on to black?
I don't know if you have anything else to say to that.
Not particularly.
All right, we can hit black since you wanted to hit that so fast.
Yeah, old age and poor eyesight. What can I say? So, one of the biggest drawbacks to black is the effects make you pay life. Now, in a game of Commander, that's not as big of a deal because you start with 40, but in the Pioneer, the Standard, the Modern formats, the best effects will make you pay life to do it, and it's not usually cost effective to go one color for that reason.
The best spells that drain life are obviously the card draws. There's a lot of card draw where you are paying 2, 3 life to draw 2, 3 cards. In Commander, there is an advantage to that because card draw is always an advantage in a game. But the negative effects in Commander, you don't you start again. You start with 40 life. That's not that big of a deal. Excuse me. When you're talking about impactful spells, Bolas' Citadel is the one that comes to mind. You can almost drain your life to the point where somebody can lightning bolt you and you're dead. I've seen that happen numerous times. It gives you a great advantage, but it just takes one card to destroy that advantage.
Absolutely. And black, by its very nature, has almost a suicide feel to it because you're paying so much life to do any given effect.
Although, if you want to talk about advantages to black, if somebody's really pounding on you and you don't really care and you want to end the game, it is a good way for self-bombing. Suicide bomber.
It does happen.
Can't talk. Another problem with black is there is not enough evasion. Most of the creatures are low to the ground. Like it's full of zombies that are just 2/2s, 3/3s, 1/1s. I mean, there it has some flying and it has some other stuff, but most of the creatures are on the ground. There's not a lot of death touch. There's not a lot of menace. There's not a lot of flying. It's mostly just low to the ground creatures.
Right. Now, black does do a lot of regeneration within the color, so it's not necessarily a disadvantage to go with black creatures if you're using the regen effect, but again, the size can matter if you're playing against something that tramples, so be aware of that within the black color scheme. It can be troubling, and if you go big with something like demons, once again you're going to have to pay life to do their effects.
Black is a very nasty color that way. The other problem with black, and there's ways to get around it, and we've talked about that in other videos, but like Avacyn, you get to the point where everything has protection as far as what's indestructible. That's the word. There's a lot of indestructible stuff out there, and black does not have a way to get around that. It does a lot of destroy, and Magic in general has a lot of destroy. But black is probably the worst color when it comes to getting around indestructible.
I agree with that. Black, I don't know that they have any cards that force things to exile. You can force a sacrifice, and that's a way to get around protection and indestructible. But yeah, in terms of just straight up kill shots, the spells are destroy effects, be they creatures or sorcery or instants.
That is probably the biggest gripe I have with black is the loss of life and the not being able to exile. That's probably my two biggest things. Now we're gonna jump to green, and green is probably one of my favorite colors because I just love creatures. Creatures, flying, ground, elves. Can't beat that. But there is weaknesses to green, and there's a lot of them. And it's not the worst color. It's a good support color. It's a good standalone color. Don't get me wrong. None of this is to say that any of these colors are bad by themselves. We're not saying that one color is worse than another. We're just saying the negatives of it. We did a video with the positives. Again, just trying to put a disclaimer and reminder in there. But as far as green goes, green it has some, but it's not the strongest when it comes to removal.
Yeah, the green spells tend to target artifacts and enchantments, which is fine. You want to have that, but in terms of getting rid of lands or creatures, green is not the best color for either of those. Like I say, it's mostly artifact and enchantment removal within that particular color.
The removal does have strictly a specific targeting, such as what's that card? Plummet, I think it is, where if it does go after a creature, it goes after flying creatures,
Right.
which is a good thing because green is the most. And we're going to get back to this later, but green has a lack of flying in the deck, and that's going to be our next point. And so the way it gets around it is Raking Canopy. If you attack with a flying creature, it automatically does four damage to that creature. And there's a lot of spells that goes after flying. But if you're being ransacked by a bunch of ground creatures and you're outnumbered, green's really bad about removing ground creatures.
I agree with that. And just to put a firmer point on lack of flying, most of the green creatures crawl on the ground. There are some things that have reach, and so that's one answer to flying. But in terms of an air assault, if you want to bring it in the air, green is not the color for you.
No, I have an elf deck. Me and Ned both have done Merfolk decks, which has green in it. We've done other tribal stuff with it. Hydra's is another one. But you look at the group of cards, all three of those, it's very rare to find anything in green that has flying in it. So that is the three biggest tribes in that group. And even the bigger creatures, they have trample, but no flying. So another weakness with green is probably an aggro. It's an aggro deck. That's what it is. Green is very aggro. It's very quick. It's very quick to hit. It's very quick to get out. But then it kind of sizzles. Playing an elf deck, it kind of solves its own problem. But outside of elves, it's really hard to get a lot of card draw with green to keep the aggro going.
I agree with that. Green, I mean, unless you're going to run a mechanic like Explore to help you accelerate through your deck, green doesn't have much at all in the way of card drawing. I don't think any of the creatures do. There's one or two spells, but yeah, it does not draw nearly as well as blue or black for that matter. So be aware of that when you're building green. You'll have to go with artifacts or some other means to accelerate through your deck.
Or straight up elves. That's the only exception to that is elves. But you have to have a lot of elves to trigger that. Outside of that, yeah, it's not. And that goes with our next point, which is card draw. Outside of elves, there's a bunch of card draw spells, but nothing that's going to really make your deck really go.
Agreed. I think maybe the only permanent in green that helps you draw spells is the Great Henge. Because if you play a creature spell, the Great Henge will put a 1/1 counter on that creature and you get to draw a card. But beyond that, green doesn't have any permanents I can think of that'll let you just activate or trigger to draw cards.
Outside of the planeswalkers, there's a couple triggers, but you have to ultimate most of them to do it. So yeah, it's really the ones that do it have a steep price and are difficult. The last problem we have with green is control.
Go ahead.
It's just, again, we kind of hit this with the removal. I guess it kind of goes with removal, but control. When you think of control deck, you think of blue. It's countering spells, destroying spells as they get played, playing on tempo. When it comes to green, it just has a lack of that.
Right. Yeah, green does not control the board at all. I think the only mass destruction spell green has is Hurricane. And it's a good spell, don't get me wrong, but you're going to hurt yourself when you do cast it because it does X damage to each player and each creature with flying.
So your creatures are probably going to be fine, but you might not be. And I think my computer just died. Nope.
It went to sleep. They do that.
Good night, sweet prince. I'm not doing very good with changing the color of the cards. We're going to go ahead and jump to white. We have a lot to cover here, so...
Yeah, white is probably the worst of standalone colors within the Commander format, and that's for several reasons. And the first one we're going to talk about is a lack of card draw, similar to green, but even worse because white doesn't have any permanents, and I don't think they even have any cantrips that'll let you draw cards. So it's strictly down to your artifacts to accelerate your deck.
Enchantments. They do green Wizards is trying to fix that with some of their more recent sets. They are trying to make it so it has more card draw and a little bit more in the way of mana manipulation, mana acceleration, I guess I should say. But again, because it's so far behind the other colors in those categories, it's like almost a little too late, and still not impactful enough to make a huge difference. It's getting there, but it still is way behind. There is a few cards, but yeah, the majority of it is mostly artifacts that you have to throw in there. There is a few enchantments, but they have a cost that sometimes you just can't afford because white creatures can be expensive. The better ones.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I guess that goes into our other one that goes with it is mana acceleration. Again, same situation. There's ways to speed it up now, but it's still too few and too far between to really make an impact as of right now.
Yeah, white doesn't have any creatures that give mana. You'd have to use artifacts for that, and they don't have the even like the dark ritual that black has. So yeah, mana sometimes is a problem for white if your deck isn't drawing the way you need it to draw.
Yeah. Another one we're going to go with is white is one of the more expensive colors. I mean, they have a lot of cheap creatures. They have a lot of expensive creatures. But if you want impactful cards you're probably going to throw in your decks, you're talking probably 4, 5, 6 mana cards. And we've hit on that. Yeah, there's some cheaper cards, but those are few and far between what you would put in a standalone white deck. Again, they are slowly working on it. There's now a 2 mana that can be your commander that is really strong. I've seen somebody build it. But again, that is few and far between. And yeah, it's just the good best cards you can use in white are just expensive.
Yeah, and go back to our episode on the white creatures for more information on that. But just a few examples are Avacyn, Angel of Hope, the Archangel of Thune, and
Feldor Sovereign.
Felder Sovereign, Darien, King of Kjeldr. These are all 6 mana cost and up creatures. Excellent plays, but very difficult to get on the board early.
And even in white, even if it's a 5 mana like Lara Dawnbringer, which is an exceptionally good angel, it still is 5 mana. And in white, it's hard to keep up with everybody else when you're throwing 4, 5, 6 mana cards. And everybody else is throwing down 4 or 5 mana cards on turn 2, turn 3, turn 4. It's just, I don't know about turn 2, but it's hard to keep up when you're playing that kind of acceleration versus white.
I think that pretty well covers white.
The only other thing I had to add to that was that out of all the colors, and again, we're not saying it's a bad color, but white is probably the worst standalone color for the reasons that we mentioned. And it's historically known.
Yeah, worst might be the wrong word. I'll say the most difficult to build. I do have a mono white commander deck, but it has taken me a long time and some very expensive cards to actually make it work.
Yeah, that's a better way of putting it. The last color we're going to get... The last color... Sometimes I can talk fast. My daughter talks really fast sometimes, but I can tend to mumble. But yeah, the worst... You say it, because I can't get it out now.
Okay, the trouble we have with playing mono red decks.
There you go.
First complaint, if you will, is red has no enchantment removal. They have plenty of things that can do lethal damage to creatures. They have spells that will destroy target artifact. They have spells that will destroy target land, but absolutely nothing that will target an enchantment. You could hit it with the what's that called? Chaos Warp. But again, that's only one, potentially, if you even draw the thing, that's only one enchantment you're getting off the board. So be aware of that. If your opponent is playing heavy enchantment decks, red is probably not going to do well against it because there's no way to get rid of them.
Yeah. Another thing is, another way I'm gonna go with that. I have nothing to add to that. Is removal. Oh, never mind. That was enchantment removal. The next thing we're gonna hit on is flying. Red has a lot of different things it does really well. Flying, it has dragons, but outside of dragons, it really don't have a lot of flyers.
Yeah, dragons and phoenixes, but that pretty well expends all the creatures within red that do fly. There might be one or two goblins, but yeah, if you're trying to set up an air defense or an air assault, you're going to have trouble if red is your only color.
And it's really hard to build around that when most of the red creatures it does has are, what, 5, 6, 7 mana?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's really hard to do that.
I guess our next thing we'll talk about with red is the low selection of planeswalkers. There are a few good ones within red, but by and large, you can get by without them, and most people do because they don't really have enough effectiveness. I'm thinking Chandra Torch of Defiance and maybe Jaya Ballard, but beyond that, red doesn't have many desirable planeswalkers within the color.
The most planeswalkers they have that I can think of are more deck specific on what you want to do with your deck. Like there's a Chandra that I really like. I can't think of what she's called right now. It's the one from War of the Spark, but it exiles cards and you play the cards, and then when you remove the mana from her and any damage is done to her, then that does damage directly. But that's kind of a very specific reason why I like that one. But it's also specific to the deck I'm playing with her. So Torch of Defiance, like you said, is one of the ones that's an all-around, can use in any deck. Most of the other red planeswalkers are very specific to what you want to do with the deck if you play them at all. I fully agree with you on that. It's good with, a couple of them are really good with, again, Jaya and Torch of Defiance, and there's another Chandra, I believe, that are really good with mana acceleration when it comes to what the Planeswalker does. You're talking 5 mana to play those Planeswalkers, so you're already going to be a little bit behind in the speed, but they're very effective when you're talking about that color. But again, as they do like lightning bolt type stuff, which you can get cheaper straight up sorceries like lightning bolt itself, where you're just going to do that anyway, and it comes out a lot faster than what a planeswalker would. It's nice to have the repeatable offense, but the price, a lot of times it gets passed up because stuff is cheaper, and it's easier to play spells such as Elixir of Immortality that lets you recycle those spells over and over and over again.
Or you have spells with flashback and you just cast them straight out of the grave and then send them to exile. But yeah, the red planeswalkers, by and large, not very desirable.
And then the last one we're going to do is a lot of the spells that we use, and this is going to finish up the color red. But the last thing we're gonna hit on is the fact that with red, if you play a lot of card draw, I believe there's some burn spells. There's very specific things that red does, but you have to sacrifice something for it to take effect.
Yes, there are things there are activations you can do, but you have to discard a card, for example, to draw two. Yeah, it's an advantage, but you might not want to give up that particular card in that moment. So it's not necessarily the right play making that sacrifice.
It's just dependent on the situation and what's on the board and how you're playing. There's going to be a lot of times where red's fine because it can produce a bunch of tokens that you're just like, I don't care. But again, there's also times, like you said, where it's very specific and it's very hard to accomplish because maybe you have one card that's being held for a specific reason and your other card is a draw spell where you have to discard a card. Yeah, that's a problem.
Right. And the other thing I'll hit on real quick, a lot of the, not a lot, there are some red creatures that have Devour. Great effect because it'll do damage, but again, you're having to sacrifice things to do that damage. So, red can do a lot of neat things. Just be aware of its shortcomings as a standalone color.
So, again, a quick disclaimer, and I've said this a couple times and we're going to say it again. When it comes to this video, we're not talking that these colors are bad in any way. Even white has some definite strengths, and you can build decks that are very effective in the white. I mean, you might have to use artifacts, or there's very specific creatures that can be really good for the reasons that we said it's not good at, and maybe you can make it work. Leave us some comments on what you guys think. What are disadvantages to colors that you guys play and ways to get around it? We appreciate the feedback. We appreciate the thumbs up. Like, share, subscribe, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe. Please subscribe. We're trying to break, 20 subscribers this time around? We're going to challenge you guys. Give us 20 subscribers if you really like the videos. Share it with your friends. And hopefully we're helpful with some ideas that we have. Again, we are here to try to encourage you to want to play Magic more. And just like I said, quick thumbs up, like, share, subscribe, share it with your friends, see what you guys think.
And give us feedback on topics you'd like to hear us discuss. We've been playing the game for some time now, and we certainly haven't covered everything there is to cover. So what's something you'd like to hear us talk about? Let us know.
And you guys have a blessed day, and we will catch you on the next one.